Welcome and thank you for joining us for our Workday Chats today. I'm Cristina Goldt, the General Manager of Workforce and Pay here at Workday and your host for today's discussion. If you have any questions, please share them in the comments below. I am thrilled to be joined today by my colleague and fellow General Manager, Shashank Saxena, the Co-General Manager of VNDLY.
Hey,
Shashank?
Christina, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're very excited to have you. If we think about the nature of work today, it is rapidly evolving. We know organizations are increasingly adopting AI. The boundaries are, disappearing across work models, and they're moving really to skills-based talent strategies, really to stay adaptable, agile, and resilient through all the change that we continue to see. We're very excited to have this conversation today to discuss key workforce trends and why a holistic workforce management strategy is more important now than ever. So to get things started, Shashank, would you share a little bit about your career journey and perhaps one trend that you're excited about, one workforce trend that you're excited about as you look to the future of work?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for the question. The first part, my career journey. I've actually only worked for 3 companies so far in my entire career. The first one was Citibank, where I got recruited out of college in a technology leadership program. Back then, it was online banking, and then mobile apps had just started to happen back then. So I got involved in the mobility wave early. And towards the tail end of my career at Citi, this whole digital transformation was a newly coined buzzword that was just starting to take off. So I was at Citi 4.5 years, followed by Kroger, the grocery retail store chain. I spent a bunch of time there leading a digital transformation and building out an e-commerce business. So I was at Kroger 4.5 years. And the third company I've ever worked for is VNDLY, which is the one I co-founded with my partner, Narayan. So we started VNDLY, and coincidentally, exactly 4.5 years in, we got acquired by Workday. So now I'm at Workday. So third, fourth company, depends on how you count the 10-year combined. So that's my career so far in a nutshell. In terms of trend that I'm excited about, it's going to be really interesting to see how flexible and adaptable companies get in managing their workforce. Because the dynamic that we are starting to see, and we all have experienced this in the last year and a half, 18 months or so timeframe, is we went from an economy where you could not hire people fast enough, and there was a war for talent, and there was a shortage of workers, to suddenly where companies started either doing layoffs or downsizing or slowdown or work slowdown or economic slowdown. And that's very typical that we see as trends, right? Like either we are in a full boom market where you just cannot fill roles quick enough to a looming recession market. And that pendulum swings very, very quickly. And it's going to be really interesting to see in the future how companies adapt and react to one end of the pendulum swing to all the way to the other end. And that's really what excites us, I know both of us, in this journey of how we build tools and technologies and frameworks to solve these problems for our clients.
Yeah, no, I think if you think about the talent, right, and there is still a war for talent, for finding the right people to do the right work. And that isn't always going to be people in your organization, right? That's definitely, I think one of the trends we continue to see is that it's really matching people to the work that needs to get done, doing that to fill skill gaps, et cetera. I mean, skills continues to be a hot conversation, but, how they're doing that is changing, where it really is that you're not just looking internally, you're looking at, can I use the extended workforce to make this a reality and really to achieve the outcomes that they're trying to get to. So if you think about that, right, and I'll just make one other comment before we move forward. So I guess at Workday, we should be watching that 4.5 mark. So anyway, so a recent study that from Deloitte that found that extended workers are expected to make up 50% of the entire US workforce by 2027. So that's not very far from now. What does this shift mean for the future of work, and how should organizations be thinking about this? How can they be better prepared?
Yeah, when you talk about better prepared, right, this is a step-by-step journey of maturity that orgs need to get on. The first step is knowing your workforce. a lot of companies know their employees really well. So if you ask them, how many employees do you have, and where are these employees located, and what office are they tagged to, and things like that, they have a very, very good handle on it. And there are systems of record, Workday, that help manage that. When you ask companies and clients the same question about contractors, very often you don't get a very direct answer, because they may know who the contractors are that have badge access in the badge access system. But what if they've outsourced work to one of the offshore providers, like a TCS with Pro-Infosys, or if they've signed statement of works with system integration partners like your Deloittes and Accentures of the world, right? When you ask them a clear number of contractor count, very rarely will you get a direct answer, because that data is generally in 3 or 4 different systems that need to be piecemealed together, and putting that report together generally hijacks someone's entire day. So step 1 of the journey is knowing about your entire workforce. Step 2 of the journey is then analyzing it, knowing the skills that they have, knowing what they're delivering, knowing how often they're delivering, and providing that holistic nature, all that data in a reportable and consumable fashion that can help you transfer the data into insights. That's really the journey that these clients have to take in terms of understanding workforce and adapting to the changing nature, the changing dynamics of this workforce. And that's really the journey we help clients take with our tools.
Yeah, no, I think that total workforce view, right? Really understanding the number has always been an ongoing challenge for so long. I guess just like digital transformation, we've been working on that for quite some time, but finally we're getting to the point where, we now have the tools to be able to provide that information, right? When we think about organizations needing to be adaptable and agile, really, in order to thrive, in order to fill critical skill gaps, as you were talking about, really to manage costs and really improve their organizational resilience, how can HR and IT leaders, partner together to develop a strategy for a total workforce, for their extended workforce?
Yeah, when you think about HR leaders, right, a lot of times the strategy, especially for the contingent worker, the non-employee side of the house, is very restricted just to talent acquisition, which is how many roles do I need to fill? Where do I find these people? How do I get them onboarded ASAP, right? And that's the extent of the engagement, generally speaking, for HR. Now, of course, certain progressive companies are taking a more holistic view where this is becoming a CHRO conversation around workforce planning, workforce analytics, skills planning, skills analytics. All these different things are boiling up and surfacing to the CHRO level. When it comes to IT, they've taken a little bit different approach where their angle is all about information security, security access, badging, provisioning, onboarding, laptop access, desk access, cubicle assignment, right? Like very ticketed workflow view of the world, not necessarily a skills and holistic nature of the workforce view or lens of the world. And what we are really starting to see, and it's happening pretty quickly, is these two lenses, the talent acquisition lens and the onboarding provisioning lens, is starting to converge to say, what skills do I already have in the enterprise? And how can I use this? And engagement models are just becoming secondary. So for example, if you need to bring on someone, can you open it as an employee role? Can you open it as a contractor role? Can you open it as a contract to hire role? And if you open a full-time employee role temporarily as a contract to hire, and 6 months later, you want to flip them over from a contractor to an employee, how do you make sure they don't lose badge access and they have to turn in their old laptop and get the new laptop 2 hours later? How do we make sure all of those processes are streamlined? And this is where we call it the collision of the worlds, right? Like HR and IT, they both have to come together to make the experience seamless in terms of candidates and workers and contractors, as well as from a systems and processes standpoint, the integration and automation that is needed, because the experience won't get seamless if it's a manually run process between different systems that may or may not integrate well with each other.
Yeah, and that seamless experience is becoming more and more important, right? I mean, that really is what we see as the kind of the unique opportunity, right? Where bringing it all together is really the key. So when you think about Workday and VNDLY, we really started our relationship almost 3 years ago. And, now we recently announced that, Workday and that VNDLY is now part of Workday's suite of products, and the only vendor management system that can directly connect into Workday's core data foundation. Can you speak to share what this means for our customers?
Absolutely. But before I answer your question, right, I'll just tell you, as a founder on the outside of Workday, I've always really admired what Workday has built. So we are really, really glad to be on the inside. And I don't just speak on my behalf, I speak on behalf of my whole team, which is why we've more than doubled the size of the org since we're here. And none of our key name talent has left the org because we're just doubling down, and there are more people joining us in the journey, right? Because M&A can at times be hard. And I really think not just me, I speak on behalf of the whole org, that's super excited to be here because we always aspired to build a company like Workday, and now we're part of Workday.
Well, we couldn't be more delighted to have you here.
Thank you. So coming back to answering your question, when you think of VNDLY, right, our founding thesis was the number that you quoted earlier. By 2027, 50% of the workforce is going to be non-employees. If Workday HCM is the system of record, the single system of truth for all your employees, which is going to be 50% of the workforce, can VNDLY be the system of record, the single system of truth for the other 50% of the workforce, which is non-employees? And that's really where VNDLY was founded, saying we are going to build, or we set out to build, the Workday HCM for the other 50% of the workforce, which is non-employees, right? That was our founding thesis. So yes, we built out a bunch of capability and functionality. The question was, how do we integrate it with Workday? And this integration started, as you said, prior to the acquisition, because when we think about it, this is not about a technical platform integration, right? Keep technology and the platform aside, because the honest truth is any two systems can connect to each other and any two systems can integrate with each other, right? The modern tech stack that Fortune 500 clients pick, they make integrations work. But it's about experience. So if you think about it today, in our personal lives, you can buy an iPhone, and then you can go out and buy a Samsung Galaxy Android tablet. And then you can go out and buy a Microsoft Windows PC. And you can try to sync data between the three. And yes, it's possible. Data can be synced. You can use Dropbox, and you can use Google Drive, and you can use email attachments. You can use different mechanisms. So people too often get hung up on SFTP versus API integration. That's secondary, right? You can move data around between systems. But what's the experience that you're going to build while doing the data sync? And the way we think about experience is, if you have an iPhone and an iPad and a MacBook, how seamless is the data sync on all of these devices, right? And how do we provide that same experience to our customers? So when Workday is a system of record for your employees, VNDLY is a system of record for your non-employees, how with a few clicks you can just turn on the whole data sync, and now all the contractor data shows up in Workday. So when you're doing workforce planning, when you're doing analysis, when you're pulling up reporting, when you're using Prism Analytics, all of that is seamless and always in sync, because the contractor data is sitting in Workday's OMS, and you can use Workday's business process frameworks and all the native capabilities that Workday has to manage contractors, just in the same way as a manager would manage employees in their platform. So that's really how we think about this, with the experience lens, not just a technical integration and data movement lens.
Now, I love that analogy that you use there, because it really is that, right? It isn't just, we're not just going to be able to report on the total workforce so you know where people are. It's how it fits into all of the processes and the entire experience that you're creating, which is super exciting, right? Because when we think about really creating those connected experiences, and when we think about the focus on managers and how they need this information and it to be in the flow of what they're doing, I think there's so much opportunity here. So very exciting to hear about that. So speaking of exciting things, we certainly could not have a conversation and not talk about AI and ML. So how do you think AI and ML will shape the future of workforce management?
It's going to be very interesting to see, right? Because on one end, I spoke about the experience of how we want to give what we want our customers to experience on a day-to-day basis. On the other end is the reality of systems and non-real-time integration and a complex tech stack, because a customer that uses Workday also uses other products that may or may not be Workday, right? And then that's just the reality of where the customer is stuck in. And when you start thinking about AI and ML, it can really help automate some of things like anomaly detection to error handling to data to a bunch of these other things can be corrected and automated to make the experience more seamless in a lot of ways. Now, when you think about AI and ML, of course, Workday has a very powerful stance in this space as well around use cases that we think about it. So Skills Cloud, no one can speak to it better than you can, but it was one of the pioneering use cases, right? And I think, Cristina, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the journey started in 2014.
You are right.
Coming up close to a decade ago at this point, when AI and ML was not your regular buzzword or chatter every day in the news. So Workday has been on the leading edge of innovation. So when a company like VNDLY gets acquired by Workday and you have those data sets already built to manage and assess, let's say, skills, I'll use skills as an example, of employees. Why can't you apply the same learning for contractors? So for example, if a manager publishes a job to find someone with a certain set of skills, that person might be a current contractor on a different team in your same organization or at your company. Why can't a recommendations engine just recommend that you already have these skills with a contractor who's probably coming off assignment next month and moving them over either as an employee or contractor? Again, workforce engagement, how you choose to do it, W-2 versus 1099, all of that secondary. But the point is, this is where machine learning, AI, and a lot of this consolidation becomes really powerful, because no amount of machine learning or AI that you want to do, nothing can be done in that space unless you have the fundamental underlying data sets. And Workday is uniquely positioned by bringing your employee and non-employee data all in one place. And that is the first step of the journey to do anything with machine learning and AI, is having the right fundamental architecture and data sets residing where you need it to then bring all this goodness to customers.
Yeah, no, it does all come down to the data, right? Having the data to be able to do what you need to do and to learn from, right? And I think, when you think about, yes, it is the number of workers you have in Workday, but now all of the extended workers that are now part of that full data set that really will allow us to do some very special things, right? From, it's near and dear to my heart in terms of matching people to opportunity, right? And that we do that. As you mentioned, but really just the efficiency and automation that we can get out of that. So much goodness. And as you said, we've been on this journey for a very long time. We're only going to continue to evolve and transform. And then when you think about our data and large language models, right? Like we have really a unique opportunity here. So very excited to see where we go. So what is one takeaway you'd like to leave with our viewers today?
The key takeaway is, when you are thinking or when customers think about what's the right technology to add to my tech stack or to my suite of products, right? Very often RFPs become about functionality. And listen, functionality is critical, right? I'm not going to underplay the importance of it. But that's a one-dimensional view of the world. There are a couple of other dimensions. Customer experience, or the example I gave about experience of how the products integrate and work together. What that becomes a foundation for that you can build up on, like the machine learning AI conversation we had, is, okay, if you're bringing these data sets together, so future roadmap and future capabilities that are going to be built upon, that becomes another dimension to consider. So the point is, look at this with multiple different dimensions, not just one dimension around the traditional RFPs around feature, function, or price, because that's just one dimension, right? Here, I'm super excited about what we're doing at Workday, and now, especially in the last 1.5 years that I've gotten closer and seeing it firsthand, how the sausage is made, proverbially speaking. I'm super excited about what we're doing with machine learning and AI, and it's going to be a huge and massive differentiator for us, because again, we are enabling, with bringing all this data together, certain capabilities that will be very, very unique and very hard to replicate. So I'm super excited about this journey and what lies ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm going to second that. +1 on all of that in the sense that it is that unique opportunity to bring together all of this information, create a really unique experience, right, for our customers to be able to have that connection throughout. And I think going back to what I said earlier on, that really the war for talent continues, and really finding the right people to do the work and making sure that we are optimizing. There's so much goodness that comes out of this, and that really speaks to the challenges that we're seeing with the workforce, because when we know the workplace has changed, and so has the workforce. And so this really allows us to take advantage of, as we see trends, as we see the trend, the Deloitte statistic that we talked to earlier, that we can help our customers really be set up for success.
Absolutely.
So Shashank, thank you for sharing all of your insight. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. And thank you to our audience for joining us today. We hope you'll tune in next month for our next episode of Workday Chats.
Thanks, Christina. I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.